My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs for Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar, Making Better Decisions with External Financial Drivers. Many organizations struggle with just getting their internal financial and operational results together in time, let alone bringing the added dimension of data from outside their company. Historically, it has been too time-consuming and costly to do so. Only the biggest Fortune 500 companies could afford the complex system to manage external data. Recent advances in the arena of cloud computing and related technology have changed the economics of acquiring and leveraging external benchmarking data to drive better strategic decisions. The objectives of the webinar this morning are to provide you the tools to help your company make better informed decisions by comparing your financial performance against relevant peers, to find leading indicators to anticipate changes in your company's environment, and to reduce time and increase the accuracy of your recurring processes requiring external data. We hope to help you with all of this today, and we welcome you to the webinar this morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Host Analytics, whose commitment to thought leadership helps make this event possible and delivered at no cost, like everything on Proformative. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll hear a joint presentation from two speakers, and then we'll move to a panel discussion where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you. So if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get them all in, but we will do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards on any presentations we did not get to. Please note that we will post the presentation to the Proformative website today, where it will be freely available, and we will also send you a link to the deck as well after the webinar. And note we are also offering CPE credits for the CPAs in today's audience this morning. A quick word about Proformative. Proformative is the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior level corporate finance, treasury, and accounting professionals. Proformative offers a uniquely noise-free and valuable online peer network, direct subject matter expert advice, and features and resources developed in direct collaboration with our constituency. You can see this in the recent features we added to our business reviews and directory, which now includes videos and features product and service provider reviews written by corporate practitioners for corporate practitioners. Okay, let's get started by introducing today's speaker. First of all, Alex Ortiz, Director of Product Marketing, Host Analytics. Prior to Host Analytics, Alex was a product marketer for Salesforce.com, the enterprise cloud computing company. Before that, he was a senior associate for Sierra Ventures, a top-tier Silicon Valley venture capital firm with over $1.5 billion in investments. Earlier in his career, Alex was an associate at Santander Bank's venture capital arm, B2B Factory Ventures. Our other speaker this morning, please introduce Carrie Brooke, Vice President Marketing, Host Analytics. Carrie currently manages Host Analytics product marketing activities. She also oversees lead generation, PR, and analyst relations. Carrie has over 15 years' experience in the CPM space. Previously, she managed a highly successful release and launch of Hyperion Planning and subsequently ran product marketing for all of Hyperion's packaged applications. During her time in corporate marketing, Carrie managed Hyperion's global launch and marketing programs. Most recently, Carrie was with Oracle, where she led the product management team responsible for the Oracle EPM planning products. Prior to working in the high-tech industry, Carrie held positions in finance and IT for large organizations such as Unilever. Carrie is a chartered UK accountant and has a BA in economics from the University of Sussex. Carrie?
Thanks, Ernie. So let's get going then on these slides. So I'm going to go through just some general trends that we've been seeing in the market and specifically some of the priorities that we've heard from finance executives. And one of the things that we hear loud and clear is around data overload. And very often people, say to us, well, there's too much information out there. And what I would argue is, in fact, there's actually too much data, and it's the way that we're consuming that data which is actually overloading us. And I love this quote here from O'Reilly Radar, where he says, we don't suffer from information overload, we suffer from information overconsumption and poor consumption habits. And just as a successful food diet can solve this, actually the way that we consume data and the types of data that we consume. It's all about building healthy habits. So why has the data requirements changed? Why have finance executives seen a different environment in which they're working? And why do they have to get that data in a different way and much more quickly? Well, one of the reasons is because of the priorities of finance executives. We've done extensive research on this topic, and what we've heard is that those priorities have changed. We still hear the sort of traditional corporate performance management priority around, well, how do I just see how my business has performed over the last year, over the last 5 years? And that's a very traditional priority, one that we see continuing. However, what we're also seeing is finance people asking the question, how can I use information and how can I get data that will enable me to better serve my internal customer base? How do I become much more of a business partner to the functional operations in my company? And also, whilst doing this, actually putting structure into the processes that they manage. So putting rigor into those processes of budgeting and planning and financial consolidation and reporting to make the process much tighter and take much less time so they can become more of a business partner to operations. And then finally, the one that we've seen really emerge over the last couple of years is by wanting to become a business partner, what I need to do is provide systems that help all operational decision makers make fact-based decisions. Now, we know that finance people always make fact-based decisions. They always have financial data at their fingertips, but how do we get that financial data out to the entire organization? So how has that role of finance evolved over time? Well, the sort of very traditional, outdated view of a finance person is that they're very reactive, that the data that they look at is extremely rigid and financial in nature. So it's cost center and accounts, and that's pretty much it. And what we're seeing in that stage is really just finance people reporting the results of the organization. And that's evolving to becoming, as I said, much more of a business partner, much more proactive. And therefore, the information that's required by those finance executives to provide to the organization is much more flexible. Now, there are many things that really help enable this, but one of them is definitely getting the technology right can really help finance folks drive business results rather than just reporting on the actual results. And what we're seeing is this emergence of, instead of just seeing finance managers look at people, processes, and technology in isolation to each other, we're seeing sort of a new breed of leaders coming forward. Traditionally, we've thought of the people aspect of the role of finance as controlling this through hiring and supervision. Very often, we've seen the processes being revalued and overhauled. Who hasn't amongst us been through a business reengineering project at some point? And often in the past, because of the heavy weight of the systems that we need to put in, very often the technology piece is delegated to IT. And as I said, what we're seeing is a new breed of finance executives where they actually see all of those three items being linked and all of those three items now being managed very closely within the finance department. So what do the processes look like today? Well, I wouldn't work for a software vendor if I didn't have my I hate spreadsheets slide at some point in the presentation. And of course, we all know the perils of spreadsheets with a lack of control, accuracy and data quality issues. And I think one of the most important things is this disconnect between the people, processes, and the systems, and those silos of information, whether that's internal information or external information. It's really difficult to link those processes, and that the mechanics of that takes far too long. And throughout the organization, we're not seeing an accountability for the results of the business for their particular areas. So those are just some of the very general high-level trends that we've been seeing in the market. I'm now going to hand over to Alex, and he's going to go through some best practices in information provision and data collection. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Carrie. So that's a really great background on what the trends are today and where things are going. What I want to do is really talk to you about also best practices we see out there from our thousands of customers, also best practices as suggested from some leading analysts, and then I'll walk you through what we've seen as some historical impediments to companies using external data. And then finally, I'll leave you with a couple case studies of companies doing some really interesting things to move their business forward with external information. So first off, best practice number one, it's really good idea to put an early warning system in. And obviously, coming off the recession, many companies were reminded what happens if they get blindsided by external events. And I think a lot of companies really suffered through that period, whether they anticipated what was happening in the economy, or really, and I think more importantly, how quickly they responded before things got really bad. So, the next slide here, we see that Gartner and Wharton had done a study, and the question about the early warning system usually becomes, okay, well, what do I put in that system? And it really comes down to indicators and drivers, and there's really two types. There's leading indicators that obviously have a bigger impact on your business than lagging indicators. And I think many of us have transitioned from thinking about reporting on results and things that had happened to start lifting our radar up to what will be happening and starting to anticipate that. And companies that do that get rewarded. They get rewarded in terms of a higher return on assets and a higher return on equity. Unfortunately, for many companies, and especially in the mid-market, they're not attempting this. There's reasons for that. The second type of indicators are economic indicators. And I think anyone who listens to the radio, reads the news, sometimes hears indicators like the Conference Board that indicate what's happening with manufacturing, unemployment, suppliers, and it really is a good gauge of what's happening out there from a macroeconomic perspective. And certainly there's folks that listen to the news every day and start to understand this, but I would hazard that many companies today miss the news and aren't quite dialed into what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And especially in this volatile economy, it's really important to be tied into what's happening out there, because there are some lot of fluctuations. Okay, best practice number 3. So I think many companies also have struggled with performance reporting, especially to boards. And this is a subject near and dear to my heart, because back on the venture capital side, we would get reports from all of our portfolio companies, and board of investors and banks, they have actually a pretty good view of how companies are performing. And when companies are just basically comparing their own results versus their own results, it's really hard to tell if those are good results, right? So if a company is growing at 15% a year, well, in a market that's growing 50%, that's actually very poor. If the market is growing at 5%, then 15% is actually a very good result. So I think the message here is just compare yourself to peer companies and other components outside of your own company, and that's a way that your board and your stakeholders can make better informed decisions about how your company is actually doing as compared to the market. And there's ways to do that, right? There's top line measurements, line item measurements like just aggregate revenue, but there's also key financial ratios, and I finance professionals every day think about ratios like R&D spend as a percentage of sales and revenue growth rates, and those are sometimes the right places to start and start building out kind of more detailed views of results comparing to peers. So the next best practice is about data management, and unfortunately, there's always horror stories out there. And I pulled out one from Fidelity Investments and their Magellan Fund. So a few years ago, unfortunately, the president of Magellan Fund had apologized to shareholders that they wouldn't be getting a share distribution at the end of the year. So obviously a catastrophe. And they traced back the root cause, and they found that, unfortunately, a tax accountant had dropped a minus sign that caused a huge error in what they were reporting. And obviously, this is one of the most egregious problems of data management and and manual error. And one of the best practices really is to start eliminating those risks from your recurring processes. And so many companies are basically have made a prioritized list of manual processes that they're eliminating kind of one by one. One place that many companies are starting is recurring monthly processes like currency translation. And that's something that I think many folks are aware of that they could change, right? The status quo today is, many people will go out and you look on the website and type in, the six digits long for accuracy, and sometimes that can introduce risk. So that is really another area that companies are trying to improve. And now on the FP&A side, this is some really interesting research by Ventana Research, and they asked finance executives what would make their revenue forecasting process more accurate. And 3 of the top 4 responses were about understanding things happening outside of their own company, whether it's market trends or the competition. And so I think many people realize that the way to drive accuracy in forecasting is bringing in some of those external drivers. There are some historical challenges out there, and many companies actually, they might realize that they need to use external data, but unfortunately they're not able to. And in fact, here's another research study by Ventana, and they asked finance executives to rate the amount of information that they're receiving in their reports. And as you see in the bottom 2 bar charts, 80% of companies report either getting too little or not at all information related to leading indicators. 85% of companies report not getting enough information on competitors' performance. So we know that there's some real gaps out there for companies to make better decisions and include some of this external data. So one of the challenges comes down to technology. And unfortunately, many systems that were built in the 80s and even the early 90s, they weren't designed to bring in external drivers in a very easy way. It's sometimes possible to integrate and build data integrations, but that tends to be costly and take quite a bit of time to build that custom for each company out there. And really what's happened, unfortunately, for many companies that aren't Fortune 500 companies is they don't have the resources to modify their systems in a way where it becomes easy to bring in external drivers. So, if you ask yourself, so that's really, where we're coming from, and you look out on the consumer web, you look out even in some of the, leading enterprise companies, and things are changing. And I think even in the early 2000s when we saw Yahoo Finance, go live, and it really aggregated a treasure trove of financial information that, before actually used to be mostly in print materials or PDF materials. And Wall Street Journal obviously has a great section on market data, and that's something that I think many finance professionals consult today. there's even been an evolution past the aggregation part of technology, and that's actually integrating that data into systems. And there's some really interesting examples out there, like Salesforce.com on the CRM side. They acquired a company called Jigsaw that has business contact data. They realized that their CRM systems were a lot more useful and powerful with data inside of those applications. And so if you're on the sales and marketing side, all of a sudden your CRM application just got a whole lot better because some of the information you need to do your job is already there. The online brokerage front, that's actually a good parallel. Today, companies like E-Trade and Fidelity, they include a lot of market information in the same place that you trade stocks, right? So I think about this in terms of making a good decision on where to invest. Clearly I need to do quite a bit of research on, what the market looks like for that company, what do the competitors look like, and E-Trade and Fidelity have made that really easy for me because they bring that information right into the application where I'll actually make the trades. And so, I think what you're seeing here is a next phase in data management and making it very easy to not only aggregate but integrate that information into the applications where you are making decisions. So the cloud is, traditionally it's been built for making better models, especially from a corporate performance management front. We see this third generation as a way to add better data to those financial models, and the end result for many companies is to make better decisions by having a more informed set of data to make decisions on. And so we think the future is really exciting with a combination of data and applications. Next, I'd like to review 3 case studies on what companies are doing with external drivers. The first one is NPR, National Public Radio. So I spoke with a financial analyst over there, and what they're doing is very interesting. They obviously they're a nonprofit, but they do create long-term plans, 1, 3, and 5-year plans. And as anyone in finance knows, it's really hard to make accurate plans that far out. There's so many things that might change. But what they've done is they've brought in access to a lot of external indicators into their planning process. And so now they can actually easily pick and choose, drivers to their media business, and also bring in comparisons of other public and nonprofit media companies. But I think one of the most interesting things that they're doing is they've added a dashboard that alerts them when some of their external indicators have changed. And that's a real great way. This is really getting back to the first concept, the first best practice of putting in an early warning system. And clearly they're able to make better decisions by sensing what's happening. And so overall, they report that this is just a great way to improve accuracy on their planning process and also spot new opportunities and risks that are happening outside the company. Next slide, please. Next case study is Mirion Technologies. This is a company of about 700 employees, and they manufacture and sell radiation detection devices, so in the manufacturing sector. And spoke with the controller there, and she said one of her challenges is that 50% of their revenues come from outside the U.S. They operate in the U.K., Canada, China, and a few other countries, and the controller there is well aware that foreign currency exchange rates can have a material impact on their business. So consequently, they need to track those exchange rates in all the countries they operate quite closely and at a monthly frequency. So as you can imagine, critical to get those exchange rates right, accurate, and timely. And so what they're doing is they're including their exchange rates directly in their performance management application. So that way they've eliminated the risks of people typing in exchange rates manually. They've also eliminated the risks of using different data sources for exchange rates. That is also a source of risk that they've been able to eliminate. And so now, when they see currencies fluctuation, especially between the euro and dollar today, they know exactly how that's going to be impacting their results, and not only results, but part of their planning process as well. So some really, I would say, really interesting ways that Mirion Technology is using currency exchange rates from the cloud. And even here at Host Analytics, our CFO, she uses benchmarking to make her board reports more informative for the board members. So I think many finance professionals have tried to go through the SEC Edgar database, and unfortunately that process leaves something to be desired, because sometimes you just can't download information on companies. Some you can, some you can't, but you basically have to go line by line, 10K by 10K, 10Q by 10Q, and cobble things together and copy and paste them into your own reporting packages. So what our CFO has done is pulled automatically peer companies that we compare ourselves to, not only in our CPM space, but in the cloud technology space as well. And she's brought those directly into the board reports almost with a click of a button. And it really allows her to have some good comparables and also some of those financial ratios that we'd mentioned before. And so she can walk into the board, our quarterly board meetings, and give the board package to our investors, so they know, how we're tracking not only against our own results, but against technology companies that we compare ourselves to and other competitors. So really, it's allowed them to make some really strategic decisions with the right information. Great. So that's it for my prepared remarks, and I think Ernie, we'll hand it back to you.
Oh, thanks, Alex, and I appreciate your tap dancing around the technical slide issues that we're having there. Before we transition to the Q&A portion of the webinar, we are going to have a few short polling questions around how your company currently leverages external data and what information your companies might prove most useful for improving your forecasting accuracy. So why don't we go ahead and just launch the first question here. The questions will be up briefly, so please respond quickly so we can gather as much information as possible. So just take a moment in order to answer those questions. Again, we wanted to make this an interactive experience for you on the Q&A side of things. So if you have any questions, please go to the questions area in your control panel and get your questions, and we will get to as many questions as possible. We have a unique opportunity here for our panelists. They are really out on the forefront in terms of leveraging external financial drivers in terms of improving forecasting accuracy on that front. So go ahead and put the other poll question up, and then what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and open up the first polling question. Maybe I'll give this one to Carrie. Carrie, as far as the external drivers that people are pulling in, are you getting some feedback in terms of what people see as the most valuable information? Is it the FX rate? Is it the financial data, benchmarking? What are people really finding valuable on that front?
That's a great question. So I think it depends on which problem people are trying to solve. So if it's a data accuracy issue and a time to close and disclose issue, then we see a tremendous amount of value bringing in information, for example, as you mentioned, for exchange rates. So, with large international organizations or even mid-sized international organizations, to do their foreign exchange adjustments at the end of each month, quarter, and the year end, they'll need to be bringing in different exchange rates for different currencies. And that very often is currently a manual process. Even for large companies, that's a manual process of entering in those foreign exchange rates. So what we're finding is if there's a big data accuracy issue, it is things like sort of the standard, what I would call the metadata of running a finance process. If you've solved the data accuracy issue and you have reduced your close and disclose time down to a world-class level, then companies start to look at more value-added indicators. And these can be general horizontal indicators, sort of macroeconomic indicators, or in fact they can be very specific, that can be very specific indicators relating to your particular vertical. And those could be things like, we have one company that makes plasma screens, and their revenues are heavily based on housing starts. So they look at housing starts data in order to drive their top-level plan. So it really depends on where you are on sort of the evolution scale of pulling in external data on what kind of information you're going to bring in.
Okay, I guess this is kind of a related question as far as the type of data that you're pulling in. So I would imagine that we're still starting with quantitative data. Has there been any requests from your firms to pull in like qualitative data, for example, to get some sense of political risk or other macroeconomic factors, ratings, or things of that nature?
I would think so, yes, from sort of the large unstructured data providers. There's probably been requests on them. What we found is people are only just beginning to consolidate their internal operational financial data, and so the next step for our customers anyway is around numerical or structured data. But I'm sure there are many requests going to other data providers, but we've primarily seen external financial information being requested.
Okay, so this is kind of a data question, I think, as far as the data coming into the systems. Just a clarification question. So the applications that are out there that are pulling in the data, so they're pulling those from external sources, and then they're pulling them into a software package such as Host Analytics, and then that's kind of seamless, for the customer. So that's just automatically getting integrated somehow and communicated, for example, within their ERP system or their reporting system. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the key, is that this doesn't need to be an additional process that a CFO or a VP of Finance is managing, right? It's not another manual process that's sort of piled on the plate. In order for it to be useful, it has to be an automated process. So it has to be a seamless integration between both your internal operational and internal financial data, and now your external financial and external operational data. If we didn't have that seamless integration, it would be more of a burden than it would be a value to organizations. It has to be seamless.
Okay, great. This next question I'll kind of throw out to Carrie or Alex, who wants to comment first. Someone has mentioned that, in the very introductory comments, we mentioned that really the ability to leverage this, have the systems to leverage your internal data and your external data are due to some of the economics that have changed in regarding access to that, maybe around cloud technology. Can you just speak to a little bit about how perhaps a cloud-based system really changes the economics of being able to really look at this data in a more robust fashion?
Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I can take that. So I don't want to turn it to a technology conversation, but there's some real differences in how cloud applications are architected versus on-premise applications. If you think about on-premise software, basically software that's installed at your office, that software gets it really gets customized in a way that makes it difficult in the future to add in structured data that's coming from outside of your company, right? Because it comes down to matching the right fields to the right fields, and it just really becomes almost impossible for a on-premise vendor to do something across their whole customer base to add in the feature. Usually what's required is a big upgrade that costs a lot of money to redo all those customizations on a new version. So with cloud computing, that all changes, of course, because there's a multi-tenant architecture. So basically there's a database structure that is common across many companies. What that allows both customers and the technology vendor to do is roll out new features, right, new application features, but also incorporate external data that has already been integrated into that cloud vendor's platform. And so it becomes actually much easier to roll out new features for cloud vendors, and that's true for any cloud vendor, whether you're Salesforce or some of the other folks out there like NetSuite. But it also means data can move in and out of systems, and it doesn't require a forklift upgrade to a new version to do so. It's really just updated by the cloud vendor and available in the applications of all of its customers. So it's I think it's a paradigm shift in how technology is built, and it really allows for a lot more future flexibility of adding new things, whether they're features or data.
Carrie, do you have anything to add on that front at all?
No, just agree with Alex. I mean, we've really seen a paradigm shift in the last couple of years with the onset of cloud technology, and not just in finance, but all functional managers being able to marry up internal and external data, and really the cloud has enabled that 100%.
Yeah, a question kind of related around the reporting functions, and someone's asking basically, is it possible, to go into the cloud rather than going in with the ERP in a reporting system? Is it possible to bolt on the functionality around these external drivers in order to push that data or in and out data with an ERP, with an on-premise system?
Sorry, was the question around the difference between on-premise or with difference with ERP?
Right. I guess the question was that someone has like an on-premise traditional ERP system, and they may have an interest in upgrading on the reporting side and using these external drivers. Is it necessary for them to go all in to the cloud in order to improve this reporting functionality in the scenario modeling?
Yeah, I mean, you can add bodies into any process, and you can probably achieve the same thing whether it's on premise or cloud. There's no magic dust with a cloud system, but where the magic is just the efficiency of doing that, right, and the availability of getting that data in. It's much less of a upfront investment anyway if you go with a cloud solution. So not only are you getting the benefit of getting your internal data requirements figured out, but with very little upfront investment, you can also be bringing in the external data. So I would say yes, it's going to be a much more achievable goal if you go with cloud technology.
Okay, thanks. I had a question for Alex. It might be related to the slide fun that we had. Regarding the case studies that you had gone through, the first two, one of them being NPR, could you please elaborate on a little bit more on the value that they found internally to leveraging that data? What's the ROI? What were they able to improve the accuracy? Any quantitative measures around that?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't share quantitative measures, but the financial analyst that I did speak with shared that his CFO was actually recently brought in. They had a change there at the top, and she'd come in from a different private organization, and when she saw the information that that the financial analyst was bringing in, that basically she remarked, this is fantastic. I've never seen information built in to planning like this and done so efficiently. And so I think there's a real qualitative piece of feedback, and that is, this is basically some new territory. It was new territory for her to see, But obviously for that financial analyst, that made him look very good, right? Using things that he knew was going to drive up accuracy. I think the great thing that we could do is in a year's time from now to go back and do a retrospective case study on how that's played out. But this is qualitatively it makes a lot of sense, and then absolutely the measuring those ROIs and results, that should be coming soon.
Okay. There's a question. We talked a little bit about leading indicators. Are you seeing any trends from your customers regarding what are the leading indicators? I know it might be firm specific, but what are the leading indicators that people find are the most useful? Are you finding any trends across industry, across company size, whether they're macroeconomics or if they're specific metrics from financial reporting and all?
Yeah, so it really comes down to almost a company-by-company set of indicators. Gary had mentioned a good example, right? Planner Technology. They already know that housing starts is a key driver, right? When new houses get built, people decide to put new flat panel TV screens, and that's what they sell. So that's something that they were actually very interested in finding, something that they were tracking before, but not as efficiently as they are now. There's obviously other businesses out there that are driven by other things, right? The price of oil has big effects on many businesses, whether it's transportation or travel. There are some companies out there that actually have very specific needs around leading indicators. I'll mention one, Icicle Seafoods up in Seattle. Many might know the TV show Deadliest Catch, right? So they're one of the companies that goes out and fishes in the Alaskan waters, and they are actually looking for really detailed information like what's the metrics around the weekly and monthly catch in Alaska, right? And that's how they compare their production rate. So those are some. That's an extreme example of very detailed information just on the fishing industry. And there's some information that's actually very difficult to get, and actually I would say doesn't exist in an automated way today. And there's certainly examples out there, but but coming back to the other spectrum, there's some real fundamental drivers out there, right? Whether it's housing starts, oil, or retail sales, right? Even consumer confidence has an effect on retailers, and that's something that I think many retailers are tracking today. So it really comes down to the business and industry.
And I would also add, even with the value of bringing in external indicators, whether they're leading or lagging indicators, one can never forget the value of internal leading indicators, like things like customer satisfaction and employee retention as well. So, when we look to the outside of the organization to bring data in, that we definitely shouldn't forget the internal indicators as well.
Okay, this is maybe a little bit of a forward-looking question. As far as the external data that's being pulled in, it seems like that's not backwards-looking, but it's data that's already out there. Do you see there might become a trend of pulling in maybe a forecasting data, so the GDP forecast or something, or if there's a call of a competitor, what their forward-looking earnings are? Do you see that as something that people may have an interest in at some point?
I'll comment on that. I'm sure there's going to be a large appetite out there to get the leading indicators, right? Forward-looking earnings growth, and the way we started out the presentation was it's about the right consumption of data, and I think Carrie said it best, where there's good data consumption practices and there's bad data consumption practices. It sounds like that question is a really good one, right? How do you get the the forward-looking earnings into your own models? And certainly that's going to make sense for probably quite a few companies. It always comes back to does the data exist, and if it does exist, can it be ingested in an automated way? Is there someone aggregating it and verifying that it's accurate? And I would say that there's going to be kind of an evolution in this space, right? There's going to be probably in the beginning very, what I'd call broadly applicable data sources, right? So whether it's, cost of capital, LIBOR rates, things that are already accessible today but ingested into applications. And then there's going to be, I think, an evolution to get more and more detail, more and more, leading indicators like the one mentioned there.
Okay, that kind of leads into kind of a related question. We talked a little bit about, bad data consumption habits. Do you have any specific advice, for people who think they may have an overly aggressive appetite for data on how to, focus on the right data, or are there any generalizations about what you consider, is bad data consumption?
I mean, I would say test, and then test again, right? So start with just looking at the obvious indicators and the obvious drivers, and see, over time whether the correlation between two pieces of data is actually a causation, not just correlation. Don't expect everybody to want to consume the data as readily, perhaps, as you do in finance, but just start testing these things, right? Start pulling in external data, start looking at your operational information, and really just start small, but start testing it. Don't try and drink from a fire hose to start with when you're pulling in these indicators. That's what I would say. If you've got anything to add to that, Alex.
No, I think that's exactly right.
Okay, yeah, just kind of, along the same front, I think it's one of the things that's coming to mind might be that, you want to look at data that has the possibility to impact decisions. So you might have a lot of ancillary data. If it's not a key driver, that might be a way to curb the appetite, so to speak.
Exactly.
And this is more of a cloud-related question, so to speak, because someone is basically saying, they're hearing a lot about, some of the collaborative opportunities and getting people to focus more on their jobs rather than doing these tasks. Can you just speak to a little bit what your customers might have seen on that front, or individuals might see the advantages that may offer on those fronts?
Well, I think that finance people providing good data to people within their organization is always a win, right, for finance folks. And the more that we can do that easily and seamlessly, and make sure that it's not, like I said, let's not make this another process, another manual process that finance people have to manage. Let's make sure that what we're bringing in, the way we're bringing it in, is it's readily available to people, and it is what they want to see. Let's not just funnel a huge amount of data into the organization. Let's make sure it's systematic, and let's make sure it's relevant.
I guess I'll add one more thought to what Carrie just said, and that is there's also obviously data that really hits squarely in the Office of Finance, but there's also external data that hits squarely in other departments, right? So if you're a manufacturer and your inputs are affected by commodities prices, then if you as a finance professional can bring to your operational or production folks how the producer price index is changing, how commodities prices are changing. Obviously there could be some hedging that you could do from your finance side, but even just from a data side, I think you'll find that your operational counterparts would actually really value that extra layer of information, right? Because they have to make production decisions, input decisions, and that's going to help them on a whole host of fronts. So I think if the original question is how does this affect collaboration, I would say that this really allows finance to add a lot of value to their operational counterparts.
Right. I guess a related question, that kind of came in along these lines as far as the amount of data. So let's say, for the sake of example, we have all this external data. How do I effectively disseminate this kind of across the operations and across the enterprise without creating too much process? And is it possible with these technologies to offer some sort of self-service consumption of some of this data, so there's not a lot of reporting that's being emailed out.
Yeah, so my advice on that is to fully integrate it with the internal processes that you've got set up. So, just as when we're putting together our annual budget, right? So we might distribute in a budgeting and planning system. We might distribute the actuals to date, right? So what you want to be able to do is to provide the external data in exactly the same way as you're providing the internal data. And like I said, that needs to be systemized and it needs to be relevant. And as long as you do that, I personally think that the data provision starts with finance, and it's not necessarily an operational self-service process right now. Again, let's do these things in baby steps. I think if finance controls that process, because what they're trying to do is put together a financial plan. So if they're controlling which data is being funneled into operations, then it means that there is still that element of control. And again, we're not just throwing data over the wall to operations folks, but it is relevant to that financial planning process.
Okay, and I think there's a question around data that you might be pulling in, external data that might be impacting your financial results. So say, for example, you're pulling in exchange rates, and obviously setting exchange rates might impact your translation exposure. Do you see any issues on that front on the audit trail, or would you see that as more quality data? So I think it's a risk management issue if we're pulling in data that might impact the financial statements, adding another layer there. Do you see any issues on that front at all?
Well, yes. I mean, I do not see an issue there because we can control which scenario that those exchange rates are brought into. So obviously when you're doing your audited financial consolidation or reporting, then that needs to be under strict rules of which exchange rates you're bringing in. But if you want to do your what-if analysis by essentially flexing the exchange rates and looking at different scenarios, then I would absolutely keep those in a separate scenario to avoid those audit issues. I mean, your books need to be clean whether you're doing what-if scenarios or not. And by systemizing that in a budgeting and planning solution, it means that you can keep those what-if scenarios separate.
Okay, great. Here's a related question. When people are becoming more aware of the potential of bringing in external drivers and external data, are you getting any trends around the concerns that people would have with doing this, or do you just see this as a cost analysis on people wanting to do this at this point?
Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the decision criteria that we've heard companies have is basically the first cut is the data accurate, right? They need to have confidence that wherever that data is coming from, whatever source that's feeding it is obviously clean and accurate and correct. So that would be, I think, step one on the risk assessment side. Step two is generally, maybe even before step one, is a quick analysis on what's the current state of data usage within these companies, right? So some companies will say, well, you know what? I know that I have to have one of my accounting team members go out and hunt for exchange rates every month. And how long does that usually take? And they'll assess, okay, this is definitely, we can see some productivity increasing by having that that team member actually work on more value-added analysis and not just data collection. So I think we've seen companies go through quite methodically on understanding their own state, understanding what the quality of the data is and how it actually gets inside their processes, and that's usually a part of the consideration before they take the next step to include external data in their processes.
Okay, great. I think we'll go ahead and take one more question, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A session and then have some closing comments. I guess one of the questions that I'm getting is, what is next? We've touched on this a little bit, just as a closing thought. What's next in terms of whether it be dynamic financial forecasting, or the external data that companies are using to make better decisions.
So I think from what we see is moving away from the general drivers and the general indicators being brought into an organization, and for people to really start thinking about specific vertical indicators that are being brought in. There's never a lack of information or data out there that can be brought in, and I think people are going to start looking specifically, as one of the questions was, they're going to start looking for sort of self-service data feeds.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carrie. With that, I'd like to close the Q&A sessions. Any questions that we did not get to during our session today, we'll do our best to get those questions up and answered on Proformative. We'd like to thank Alex and Carrie Brooke for their time and insight. If anyone on the webinar would like to connect with either of the speakers, please indicate that on the survey we'll be sending out later this afternoon. As I mentioned before, these individuals are both recognized thought leaders in their field and are an excellent source of information on today's topics. Another thanks to today's sponsor, Host Analytics, who makes this event possible for us this morning. And again, regarding CPE credits, if you did not sign up for CPE credits on the way in, please send an email to twalsh@proformative.com, and that email address will also be on the slides that we're sending you later this afternoon. Finally, I'd like to thank the audience for your valuable time. We hope to see you on Proformative.com and on Proformative future events. Make it a great day, everyone. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your time. Have a great day.